Yeah, we're not 2-26 bad. You know what I mean? Like, no way are we that bad. Um,
Now I'm in 100% agreement with Cade Cunningham. We go back to the 2023-2024 NBA season. Nobody could have predicted what the Detroit Pistons had gone through. We all know how much of a tumultuous season it was, the crazy losing streak, and then ultimately just winning 14 games on the season. And Cade Cunningham, as you guys saw in the clip, he had a viral moment where he was just looking very confused, very distraught. And I think he said, "There's no way that we're 2-26 bad." And we fast forward to this season and we look at the Detroit Pistons, and I find something so interesting that I don't think a lot of people take into account. We look at the Detroit Pistons, we look at their roster. The roster is not constructed that differently. The Detroit Pistons new president of basketball operations, President Langdon, he said that he wanted to continue to build around this young core. He believed in the young core in his team, so it wasn't no big time structural changes to the Detroit Pistons, but instead some additions. And looking at these additions that the Detroit Pistons signed, and I find this so fascinating, and I think it speaks to the volumes of one, Coach JB Bickerstaff, and it also speaks to the volume of how truly special Cade Cunningham is, because we look at those new additions that the Detroit Pistons have brought on to the team this year. When we look at Malik Beasley and we look at Tim Hardaway Jr. and we look at Tobias Harris, now by no stretch of the imagination am I trying to discredit how good these guys are, but these are not top tier NBA veterans, or these are not top tier role players. The Detroit Pistons got Tim Hardaway Jr. on a 1-year deal. They got Malik Beasley on a 1-year deal. Tobias Harris on a 2-year deal, who they spent the most money on. But what I'm getting at, I didn't think that the collection of these three role players makes that big of a difference to where the Detroit Pistons only had, at one point, they had a record of 2-26, and here we are in this season, and they have a record of, they're about 40 some games into the season, they're one game above 500, sixth place in the Eastern Conference with a record of 27-26. So we look at the Detroit Pistons, and it seems like what the really big problem was upstairs in the front office, and also with the coaching situation in Monty Williams. Because when we look at the Detroit Pistons, those were really the biggest changes have taken place for this organization upstairs in the front office and with the coaching staff. And we've seen how much big of a difference that JB Bickerstaff has made for this young team. They have an identity, and that identity right now is nothing too crazy, is nothing that's hard to understand. But the Detroit Pistons, they're in the mode where they're going to win by any means necessary. Sometimes it's going to be ugly, sometimes it's going to be really pretty. So I think that's the identity that they've taken on, and we look at the Detroit Pistons as a team as a whole. And once again, really with no crazy structural roster changes, but the additions that they did bring in has been very nice, impactful additions. But from individual standpoints, those guys were not that good in their last current situation. So that's why I think this is a really beautiful situation. And once again, it speaks volumes to how good Cade Cunningham is and what a terrific job that Coach JB Bickerstaff is doing. But we look at the Detroit Pistons right now. We look at them in all of these statistical team categories. Last season, you look at all of these categories, the Detroit Pistons were 25th or lower. And now this year, they have made significant progress, and that's what this season was about for the Detroit Pistons. This season was just about making progress. I don't think a lot of us had them being this far up in the standings this early in the season. They're at sixth place in the Eastern Conference, and I know the Eastern Conference is very weak this season, but we cannot criticize the Detroit Pistons for things that are out of their control. But defensive rating, they ranked 12th in the NBA in that category, so they're a top 15 team in the league in defensive rating. They're a top 10 team in the NBA when it comes to rebounds per game. They're a top 15 team in the NBA when it comes to offensive rating and points per game. So in all of these statistical categories, as a team, where the Detroit Pistons compared to last season they were 25th or lower in just about all of these categories this year they have taken a big leap to becoming one of the teams that's in the middle of the pack and even being a top 10 team when it comes to rebounding. So these are amazing things for the Detroit Pistons. And like I said, I want to stress this again. It just emphasizes of how crazy and how big of a disaster last season was when it could have been 100% avoided, because like we said, this is pretty much the same team. The best players on the Detroit Pistons are still the same best players from last year. When we look at Jalen Duren, who as of late has been playing out of his mind. When we look at Asar Thompson coming back, starting to get more acclimated, he had a very tough injury. He was dealing with blood clots. We see how good Amen Thompson is for the Houston Rockets. I definitely think his brother has that in him as well, because these guys are identical twins. They've taken this NBA journey literally step by step together, and I'm sure he has some special talent, and he displayed that a lot in his rookie year last year. I thought Asar Thompson was really good. He had some games in the beginning of the season where he was getting 12, 14, 16, 18 rebounds, playing amazing defense, and as the season got worse and worse, Monty Williams, he got a little scared and he stopped. He ultimately Asar Thompson, his minutes just kept getting lower and lower. So he's very special. We look at Jaden Ivey, the season that he was having before his crazy injury, and then right up into that injury, he was on a weekly basis getting better and better. He was having career highs in points per game and field goal percentage, 3-point percentage. An amazing season for Jaden Ivey. And last year, it was a very awkward situation with him and Monty Williams. For some reason, Killian Hayes, the guy who requested a trade and ended up getting cut by the Detroit Pistons, was starting over Jaden Ivey. And if you watched the Pistons last year, you could see that Jaden Ivey's, you compare his body language to his rookie year to his sophomore year, it was completely different, and he did not look like he was enjoying the game of basketball. And my theory was, I think Killian Hayes, he had to be doing Coach Monty Williams. He had to be washing his car, doing his laundry or something to get the start over the 4th overall pick. After what we seen Killian Hayes was the last couple of years, it just didn't make any sense. So Jaden Ivey, he was having a brilliant year. We wishing him a speedy recovery. I heard he's taking it day by day, and they're not rushing anything. They want him to come back when he's ready mentally, and then also when he's ready physically. And then also we look at Cade Cunningham, the face of the franchise, having a career year, and I don't want to sound like one of those guys, but I promise you, seeing this coming from Cade Cunningham, all it took was one or two 3-point shooters to get on the court with him, to where teams could not just load the floor on him very obviously and not allow him any type of room to operate. But now he has Tobias Harris, who's a scoring threat from all 3 levels on the court, who can score with the basketball in his hands, who can score through the post, who can score off cuts. And then you have Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. Those guys have been very impactful this season for the Detroit Pistons. Like, I don't want you guys to misconstrue what I said when where they were at last year individually, they weren't that good. And I know they've been making the biggest difference in the world for the Detroit Pistons, but I'm just proving that to the point to show how much coaching matters, and then also how good Cade Cunningham is. And Cade is having a terrific season. He's tied with Domantas Sabonis for the second most triple doubles in the NBA this year. They both have 8 apiece, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe LeBron is up on that list as well. But Cade is definitely top 4 in the league when it comes to triple doubles. He's averaging 25 points per game. He's averaging 9 assists per game, and he's also averaging 5+ rebounds per game. And he's an all-star this year. So this has been a terrific season for the Detroit Pistons. It's glad to see that this young core is finally starting to show how much potential that they have. But the Detroit Pistons being sixth place in the Eastern Conference right now. If you look at the Eastern Conference standings, all the teams below the Detroit Pistons, their records are really battered up. So I think bare minimum the Detroit Pistons, they get into the play-in tournament this year. But I'm hoping that they could keep this 6th seed. It would be so fun to watch the Detroit Pistons in the playoffs. But that's what I want to talk about with you guys today. Shout out to the front office. Shout out to President Langdon. Shout out to Coach JB Bickerstaff. 5. Shout out to Cade Cunningham, and also shout out to the rest of the Detroit Pistons because they've been playing extremely prideful this season, playing extremely hard, and it's been leading to wins and some very entertaining ball games. But that's what I want to talk about with you guys today. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, comment down below how you feel about the Detroit Pistons this year, especially compared to last year, and then subscribe for more weekly content. We do this all the time, man, and that's curtains.